representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
I feel like 2024 is going to be magical.
Fish on First Live, off-day edition of our live streams, entering every single Marlins series as we have been doing all year, as we've been doing now this, believe it or not, the fourth season that we've had these twice weekly streams for the Marlins. I'm Eli Sussman, of course. The show presented by Berger and Hicks, as they've been with us all season long. And you can find their info scrolling across the bottom of the screen the entire time. I got Kevin Barral here. Got Alex Krutchik. Louis Adio Weiss is making his 2024 stream season debut. And our special guest of our super subs, I enjoy his company very much, and he's been on the show several times before. It's Gabe Revilla. Gabriel Revilla. How's it going, Gabe?
It's going well, man. It's going well.
Thanks for hopping on. And Louis, how's everything?
It's going.
What are you doing here?
I am free and available to talk Marlins baseball. And sad that there is no baseball for me to watch, at least locally today. So I'm here.
You are here, and we are in the midst of the hottest stretch of the Marlins season to this point. They have won 3 straight series. They have climbed all the way up to the 3rd worst record in baseball after everybody was fearing the absolute worst. They've won 2 out of 3 straight series against the Tigers, against the Mets, and now against the Milwaukee Brewers. First place Milwaukee Brewers in the NL Central. Kevin, considering the level of competition that they faced right here and how they played overall, is this the most impressive of their series wins so far this season? There's not very many to choose from, but this one was pretty good.
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, you know, starting pitching in all 3 games was pretty good for the most part. Especially Luzardo yesterday, completing 8. Couldn't have asked for a better start from him, honestly. It wasn't his dominant 8 strikeout, 7 strikeout pitcher, but it's one that's going to eat a lot of innings, you know, induce a lot of ground balls, especially, a lot of fly balls. That was definitely one of the more interesting parts of his outing. A lot of fly balls out there. So, yeah, definitely nice to see that. And then they walked it off on that first game, I believe it was. And extras, or off of Mitch White. And extras. Yeah, they came back. They were down. They came back in the 9th. It was a 2023 Marlins win. And then, unfortunately, that middle game was definitely a tough one there with who started that middle game? I'm forgetting.
That was, let's see.
Who was it?
That was Trevor. That was Trevor Rogers.
It was Trevor, yeah. He struggled big time. A lot of walks, and I think this is a guy we could dive a little deeper into because it's just feels like the pitch selection just isn't what it should be. Sinkers just have gotten hit super hard. Feels like maybe more use of the changeup would do him a lot of help, as well as the slider. It's been a lot of not confidence issues, I would say, but I think, and we kind of spoke about this in our chat, we could start having this conversation where should Trevor Rogers even be in the Marlins rotation? I think he's in it at the moment more out of a necessity because obviously you still have Edward Cabrera out, you still have multiple guys out, and you need someone in there. You still have a Sixto in that rotation. Obviously the puck experiment didn't work. Trevor Rogers has struggled, and I know he had a great start against Detroit, and I put this when I wrote my article that he could be a pretty good long man out of a bullpen, 2-3 inning spurts, maybe a little more. I think that wouldn't hurt him at all, but pitch selection has 100% been a big issue for Rogers, and couldn't have asked for a better offensive series in that middle game at all. And then it was the complete opposite in that final game. The only offense he got was from Jazz and with that leadoff homer. But put him past Chris Coughlin for the most leadoff homers in franchise history, with Hanley now at 25. So maybe Jazz won't be able to surpass Hanley. Assuming he's not going to be on this team past July 31st. But definitely good to see him at least finish second on that list.
All right. Yeah, Gabe, I want to hear from you just on Trevor, because I think you tweeted this recently about just the disappointment with the pitching staff as a whole compared to even where they were last year. And like Trevor, aside from that one good start he had against Detroit, he's been pretty rough. So, I mean, what is your optimism about him actually like rounding into a decent starter? Or is it time to just try something else with him and like move him to a different phase of his career in a smaller role on this team?
I've been thinking this probably since the beginning of last year. I think the hope that he kind of put in to a lot of Marlins fans with his, what was it, the 2021 season?
Yeah.
Where, rookie of the year contention and all that. He has never been able to pick that back up. And I think it was a little bit of overperformance. And I think overall with this team, that's a perfect example, as well as AJ Puck in the middle game. If the pitching is not nails, I mean, we'll lose 100 games for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, yeah, I really do. I blame this entire. I know you can blame a lot of people for a lot of things, from the front office to the lack of offense to a ton of stuff. But when you look at how many games the bullpen has blown, how many games, our starters can't get past 4 innings, 5 innings. I mean, it tells you right there. If our pitching is not nails, with a team that lacks offense, we'll never be able to get it together.
Yeah. Anything from you, Lewis, about Luzardo? Kevin touched on it pretty briefly, but I think you noticed that like in April, he had gotten off to this really bad start, really sustained slump before he went on the IL. Is he now at this point where he looks to you like the 2023 version of himself?
I mean, I think it's maybe hyperbole because it's only a 3-start sample size since he's returned from the injured list. But I actually think that if this is the kind of pitcher we're going to see going forward, where he's not, he's kind of put ego aside and said, I don't need to throw 98 anymore, and kind of just tried to pitch more at 93 to 95, then I think he has the potential to not only look more like the guy that was, 20% above league average on a run prevention scale last couple of years going forward, but I think he has the potential to be even better, just because I think that his stuff, while he's not gonna, hit 97 as often as he, was in the past, I think he has enough by way of pitch repertoire to be incredibly effective. I mean, I made the comparison last night to him kind of pitching in the vein of what we've seen recently with the likes of Shoto Imanaga and Ranger Suarez, guys who, throw low 90s, but they pitch. They don't they're more pitchers than they are necessarily throwers. And I think maybe since Luzardo's come back from the injured list, and I think I'm sure he seems like a very kind of forward-thinking guy as far as how he evaluates his outings and, just in having conversations with him, seeing that I think maybe he's kind of attuned to all of the injuries we're seeing pitchers have, particularly guys throwing hard, and saying, I don't want to, I've already kind of been a casualty of that. I don't want to be like a fatal casualty where I have to have, baseball's pitching death of Tommy John surgery. So I think he's kind of just changing the way that he is going about it. And I think that it will only pay dividends given if he's just one of those guys where if he's on the mound pitching, you get 180 innings of Jesus Luzardo, you'll take that over 90% of pitchers in baseball. So I think, I'm very excited about what I'm seeing going forward. But pitching is so fluky that to me, it's a start-by-start thing. So every start that he does it, I believe it a little bit more. But for now, I'm very encouraged with what I'm seeing from him.
Yeah, and then one thing I quickly want to add with Luzardo, specifically the last two starts. I didn't notice it too much in the first one and back from the IL, but it's the changeup. I mean, he mentioned it was his go-to pitch in that Phillies start. No, sorry, the Mets start, which was the second one back. And then last night he had 6 whiffs on it, 9 whiffs in his last one. Definitely, it's still his third most used pitch. Don't get me wrong, but I feel like he's incorporating it more into where he's trying to steal some whiffs or trying to get ahead of the count a lot quicker, and it's definitely helped him out. I mean, he was ahead of the count multiple times, and I believe Skip mentioned it post game where he was ahead of the count multiple times, but those were the moments where Milwaukee, which again a really good team, who just struggled in this series, really got to Luzardo there on those 0-2 counts specifically, and definitely got those hits. I think he gave up 3 hits. Those 3, I believe, were all on 0-2 counts. So disappointing on that end, but still good to see that he's getting ahead of the count, and the changeup's definitely been a big piece of that.
Yeah. And just one last thing on this series. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jazz later, but from Krutchik, coming off a game where he provided the only offense. Now, overall, like his numbers have now been looking really respectable, almost across the board, a little bit better than his career averages in there. And he's been healthy too. Like he's missed one game this entire year to this point in the season. So yeah, how is at this point in the post Arise era, has he pretty clearly established himself as the best player still on this team, position player wise?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to crown him the best position player yet, but there's definitely some small to medium-sized victories for him. Like you mentioned, he's played in all games but 1 or 2 this year. That was a huge thing coming into this year. Can Jazz actually stay healthy and stay on the field? And he has. The second question we had about him was, can he learn how to hit lefties? He's still not hitting lefties great, but it's certainly better than it was last year. Last year, I believe it was like 175 or somewhere around there. It was below the Mendoza line. Now, I'll look it up right now to get the exact number, but it's in the 220s.
227. Yeah, 227.
A huge difference from last year. And that was really, remember the days when Mattingly was here and he just straight up wouldn't play Jazz against lefties. Like he just wasn't playing against lefties at all. And then Skip Schumacher had the bright idea last year to let him keep playing so that he would get better, and he has. And then the third thing, this wasn't so much a question, but it is a nice surprise. He has been great in that leadoff spot since Arise got traded.
Yeah, that's right. He's been there almost every game. A couple of times against lefties, they've Dane Myers batting leadoff right now, but otherwise, yeah, Jazz has seemed was going to. Yeah, I mean, both him and Sanchez are still to some extent they are in a similar boat where their approach against lefties and the types of swings they take against lefties just don't give them a chance to do much damage. So with Sanchez, he's still getting pretty strictly platooned, but Jazz has graduated a little bit, at least in Skip's eyes. And part of that is just because their lack of alternatives in center field behind him in that respect. So I want to take a quick look at where this roster is currently at with the Marlins right here, because there's a guy Tim Anderson just came back a few days ago. I don't think there's anything brand new to add on TA, but I bring this up just because tomorrow is going to be the first day that Xavier Edwards is eligible to come off the 60-day IL. He's been missing the entire year due to a foot infection right here. It's the kind of job where entering the season, you probably would have thought he was ahead of Otto Lopez on the depth chart, and that he was ahead of and guys like Lopez and Emmanuel Rivera weren't even in the picture a couple months ago, but now they are. Vidal Brujan has been better than probably people thought he might be. So my question to you guys, I guess I'll go to Kevin first on Edwards here, is where does he fit on this roster now for a guy that was impressive at the end of last year, but is there room for him on this team as currently constructed? I think people thought once Arise got traded that would open the door for Edwards to be their main second baseman, or at least a part-time second baseman. And now, as I look at it, it's a pretty crowded picture. So where do you think he fits in? And like, when do you think he actually comes up again?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because right now Otto Lopez is playing like the best player on this team lately. You have Vidal Brujan, who's really stepped it up. Props to him. Tim Anderson's not going to play every single day, but still enough to where Xavier Edwards is kind of left out of the mix here. He's kind of the odd man out. They have minor league options. They could easily just put him in AAA, let him get everyday at bats and secure that. But he really had a good showing when he showed up, when he came up to the big league level. So I'm interested to see what they do. Then you have an Emmanuel Rivera, but Otto Lopez and Vidal Brujan, two guys who really haven't played much third, and you're not going to put TA over there especially after struggles at shortstop. So you got to ask yourself, are you going to, make a move because Edwards can't play third, unfortunately. He can't play short. Although Peter Bendix did say they would give him every opportunity possible to play, which that includes shortstop. And that's all he played during spring training. That's all he's been playing in his rehab assignments. So there's the case where maybe he does play shortstop. That's definitely a possibility. I think it is, honestly. Although we may disagree with it. We may not think he's a very good defensive shortstop, but it's there. And if you like the hit tool enough, he would do it. They would put him there. And obviously Bendix wants him at shortstop. He's made that very clear. So out of all the Bendix has given you, it's that one is pretty certain they want him there.
Yeah. Who do you guys think has – because I know, like, when spring training came around, everybody was kind of worried about Xavier Edwards playing shortstop because the guy doesn't have an arm. My question is, who has the better arm, Xavier Edwards or Brujan?
I think you need to put just about everybody over Edwards in the throwing arm department. That includes Brujan, just by default. Yeah. So for people that included, I put this on the screen as well, just to show that Edwards has been playing shortstop the last couple nights in Jacksonville after playing second base last weekend. And it seems that he is not in the lineup tonight. So I guess the question is whether I'm almost certain it's a day off where he's still rehabbing. He's not even playing complete games yet. So I think 99% sure that tonight he's just taking a day off to recover and then continue his rehab assignment. But it is a coincidence that tomorrow he'll be eligible to come off the IL. So there's a 1% chance he is flying all the way to Arizona to be reinstated off the IL. But I think almost certainly he's off tonight. He hasn't made any throwing mistakes yet from what I've seen on the rehab assignment, but he did make this really routine fielding error at second base on a few days ago on Sunday, where it just went really slow grounder straight to him, and he simply could not get his hands on it, and somebody reached base because of that. So that's what I like to remind people. Regretfully, I have to remind people that even at second base, he's not great there. There is still limitations, and that's what makes him such a fascinating player, because the speed is at the top of the scale. The contact skills are pretty close to the top of the scale. It's just that the power is all the way at the bottom of the scale, and his arm strength is all the way at the bottom as well. And that makes him just such a complicated player.
Yeah.
But how do you view him, Lewis, all things considered, in his role on the team? Is he somebody that they should make a priority to play a lot, or is he kind of in this really narrow role just because of the limitations that he has?
I think you still need to give him the opportunity to hit at the major league level. And, because of the lack of power, you may look at his batting average and then you look at his adjusted OPS plus and you're like, okay, well, then there's clearly a disconnect that I'm not understanding here. But I think it's simple. I don't want him playing shortstop. We've even had conversations with the likes of Callis who have told us he can't play third base either. You have to kind of stick him by necessity at that point at second base, but you also you have the conundrum of I don't want to move Otto Lopez. And, we just touched on Jazz being, durable this year and playing every but one game thus far. So I know they've experimented with him in the outfield. Do they entertain that idea again? You could, if theoretically he could play, center field, something they have tried to do with him, why not try him out in a corner the day that De La Cruz DHs? Or if Jake Burger needs a day off and you want to somehow find a way to keep Rivera on the roster because he's a good third baseman defensively, you do that and you throw Xavier Edwards in left field. Generally speaking, you can hide a bad arm in an outfield corner. I think Sanchez, for a lot that we say about maybe some of the decisions that he makes defensively and on the bases as shortcomings, I think he's okay in right field. I wouldn't really need to see him moved off of there. But I mean, if you want my honest opinion, other than what I'm saying, just get rid of Tim Anderson. And I'd say that because, you know, baseball, in my opinion, is a what have you done for me lately sport. For the past better part of a year and a half, Tim Anderson has done nothing but be well below replacement level in every facet of the game, except maybe hitting lefties and stealing bases. The problem with that second point is he's not on base enough for that to even matter all that much. So I trust somebody who has maybe some short-term upside versus somebody who had upside, you know. And when you're trying to kind of find, you know, when you're trying to work through a rebuild, if that's what apparently this team is going towards, I think it's now or never is the time you kind of want to see, like, okay, is Xavier Edwards going to be a part of this team? And if they're doing a St. Louis Cardinals a la 2014 when they had a million outfielders and you're just shuffling all these guys around and not giving them enough consistent playing time, then you never know what you're actually going to have until they somehow end up on another roster and they somehow perform there. So I mean, cut ties with somebody like Tim Anderson who, you know, isn't hitting. If he still has minor league options, you leave him in the minor leagues to get the consistent playing time. And then if Tim Anderson isn't hitting in a week or two, then you know what decision to make. I don't really think it's that hard. I mean, Brujan isn't a great defender at shortstop, but I would rather, you know, maybe have his services there than Tim Anderson's. But, you know, I just think that, you know, it's now or never for them to just let Xavier Edwards get consistent playing time. And if they don't, then they don't. But, you know, you don't want to see them make the same mistake they made with somebody like Jordan Groshans, though he didn't pan out. I don't think he was necessarily given a fair shot to get enough normal playing time. But again, you know, what do you do in that instance? In my opinion, I think the answer is easy. Give it a week with Tim Anderson for him to miraculously do something. Then if not, then you know what to do.
A week. You're getting close to the end of your leash with him. Or maybe, I don't know. There is precedent, of course. If you look around the league and you see other guys that are so far below replacement level, this is the time of year where some of them teams cut their losses and accept them as a sunk cost. With him, it's a little more complicated because he had this IL stint with his back. Who knows if that was a regular IL stint or more of a phantom psychological mental break sort of thing. So I don't know how much of his struggles they want to attribute to potentially not being fully healthy. And at the same time, it's just because they've fallen so far in the standings so early that there is suddenly just not that huge urgency to win games right now where, I think this is a case where he's going to get a longer leash than other veterans performing in this situation, just because no matter who they put in his replacement at his spot, it's not going to make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things for this year with him. But people know how I feel about him. The evidence is pretty strong that this is just a guy in a different phase of his career compared to what he used to be. And the bounce back seems pretty unlikely here. I mean, the White Sox last year, they tried all they could to get him traded at the deadline. And of course, they wanted to trade him in the offseason as well. But even by then, his stock had fallen so far that teams just didn't see him as an upgrade over what they currently have. And at this point, he is running out of time to do anything that would actually change people's opinions of him on this. So yeah, I think it's going to be, if I was to predict how this is going to go, sometime next week, they officially bring Edwards off the IL. They option him to AAA, which just means he gets his 40-man roster spot back. But until then, I think it's going to be a matter of waiting for another infield injury to come up. Or, I don't think that TA decision is, I would guess that Isaac was not here with us, but he estimated that at the end of June, maybe, is when you could see them potentially make a hard decision if the production doesn't improve. And I kind of agree with that. I think we're still a month away probably from TA being squeezed out.
Also, just got word that Xavier Edwards is still in AAA. So if he were to get activated, it would be probably optioned back to Jacksonville. So they still do have to make a 40-man move to add him back, I believe. So someone does have to get DFA.
Well, there's not a whole lot of drama there. There are, unfortunately,
that's pretty easy
on this 40-man roster that are they're just not good baseball players, to be honest with you. guys who started this year as non-40 man, guys like Eli Villalobos. No offense to a fellow Eli, but I don't think he would get claimed if he was paid. There are Johnny Pareda. Johnny Pareda is still hanging out on the 40 man like over the last month as that third catcher. But again, that's another guy, an 11-year minor leaguer before the Marlins gave him an opportunity. That's another one where he will clear waivers who'd stay in the organization. So with him, with JT Chagua, pretty soon they need a 40-man spot for him. I think that is going to be a conversation for next show potentially about how they get Chagua back into the equation right here. Yeah, just the little things on the margins that could potentially happen with this group. I want to go into our flipped fish for this episode, which is as we always do on this show, we pick a guy that previously played for both the Marlins and their opposing team during their career at some point, almost always a retired player. And this one is very difficult because it is a long ago retired player. So I don't love anybody's chances of getting this right, but we will go through it nonetheless on this one. I think Alex Carver, if he was with us, he has mentioned this guy in unrelated conversations over time. So he would probably be able to figure this one out. But here we go. Just some biographical details from Baseball Reference about this player, who was a first baseman primarily, played from 92 to 2004, over a 289 career hitter, almost an 800 OPS. He was all right. And yeah, so a part-time player for some of that time, a full-time player for at stages as well. Think it over, come back from the other side of the break, and let us know if you can figure out who this is. And then we'll have the rest of the show to get you ready for this upcoming series and look at some other bigger picture topics about the Marlins. So stick with us here on FOF Live.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
Do you have any idea, Gabe, who this might be?
Man, every single time that you guys do the flip fish, I'm like absolutely clueless. This is not my strong suit. I couldn't tell you. I don't have the faintest clue.
It's a World Series champion who I think is still in the Marlins organization. He was last year as a hitting instructor. I think he is right now. It's Greg Colburn.
He is still in the organization. Yeah.
I wouldn't have guessed
that. He was on Troy Johnston's podcast last month.
He was, yeah. He was their first guest or second guest. So, yeah.
I didn't know Troy Johnston had a podcast.
That's he cool. Did. Him and our good buddy Scott Kornberg. He's going to be on the podcast too. So
that's cool.
Yeah, fish. As we head into this Marlins D-back series, I felt we're obligated to revisit the sexy, polarizing trade made between these two organizations about 5 years ago. We're coming up on 5 years since the Jazz Chisholm Jr. Zach Gallen trade. And I would say we haven't really checked in on it very closely over the last year or two. I think people have come to a decision on how this panned out one way or another. Alex Krutchik, where do we currently stand with how this has aged? Now that both of these players have gone from prospects to guys that are now relatively into their arbitration years, we know that Jazz is going to be somebody that gets called about at the trade deadline this year and could be on the move. And we'll see what the Diamondbacks themselves having a pretty uneven year. Like, it wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if Zach Gallen is like a surprise entry onto the trade market as one of the very best pitchers available. But for both of these guys that have had a decent amount of major league success, how do we feel about this decision all these years later?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Zach Gallen's having a better career so far than Jazz is. That's just the truth. It's still one of those trades that I make. If I'm Mike Hill, that was a Mike Hill trade, right? Yeah, that was a Mike Hill trade. If I'm Mike Hill, I still make that trade because as has been the case over the last 4 years, 5 years, the Marlins had a lot of pitching and not a lot of hitting. So they did what they had to do. And Jazz is an everyday, regular starter in the majors who is at his worst, like his absolute worst, an average player. And at his best, he's very good. So, yeah, Zach Gallen is better, but it's still a trade that I make. And also, one thing that I was talking about with one of you guys, now I'm forgetting who it was that I was talking about this with, but Jazz has gotten better as a player since he was brought over. Because I remember one of the biggest things that people were criticizing him for when he was still a minor leaguer was that he struck out a lot. And each year that he's been with the Marlins, the strikeout percentage has gone down by a couple notches each year, except for last year it went up. But now this year it's now at the lowest it's been while he's been in the majors. So there's still improvement to be had, but one of the biggest gripes that people had with him seems like it's so far a pretty good success.
At the time of the trade, he was perceived to be their potential shortstop of the future. And that has been an interesting twist that he had a very limited opportunity to play short with this team. And then when they got a new second baseman, instead of moving him back to shortstop last year to play with a rise there, they made that bold transition to center field. So that's been an interesting wrinkle in this. I don't think anybody foresaw him being an outfielder, much less a center fielder on a full-time basis when that deal was made right now.
And he's doing, at least by the eye test, and Skip Schumacher said the same thing last night, just by the eye test, I'm kind of liking what I'm seeing out there. I mean, he's not a Gold Glover like Avi Garcia said he would be last year, but like I don't hate him out there. Like he hasn't done anything to cost the Marlins games this year. And I remember thinking early last year that he was going to cost them games. He hasn't. He hasn't really been a plus defender, but he's been fine out there.
Yeah, and you kind of start looking back at his 2021 season, which was his all-star season with the Marlins. Obviously, 60-game samples, not 2021. What was it? 2022.
2022, yeah.
Yeah, his all-star season, 60-game sample size. He's getting close to that 60-game sample size, and it's been his best season since then. So, you know, obviously it's not a win for the Marlins by any means. Zach Gallen almost won a Cy Young. He's been amazing, pitched in the World Series. He's been amazing. There's just no other way to put it. But, you know, he's putting up good numbers since then. 114 WRC plus. He has 7 home runs. He's been a great leadoff hitter for the Marlins this season since the Urias trade. So a lot to like, and that's going to be a big reason why most likely they're going to get a haul for Jazz. At least a good amount of prospects in return.
What do you think the chances are? Okay, let's just say that he stays with the Marlins. What do you think the chances of him moving back to short are? Given the fact that he wasn't given a lot of opportunity, he's an okay defender at center field. What do you guys think?
Zero.
Short?
Zero.
Right,
He's
there's a reason.
He is. I thought he was a bad defensive center fielder. Now I don't think he's like the Statcast metrics like his arm, but I don't think his arm, like whenever I watch Jazz make a throw from center field, it does very little to like excite me because it never feels like most of his throws are on target. They feel very like rushed. As far as shortstop goes, he was terrible there when he played it. He's better at second base. The problem now is you have a second baseman out of nowhere who's hitting. I mean, it's an easier decision to move him back to second if Otto Lopez regresses to what, you know, his career norms in the minor leagues have suggested. But, you know, the problem is like, I don't think that's going to happen. I cannot see a scenario where he's playing center field. I personally thought, I mean, I remember when Fernando Tatis moved to the outfield for the Padres, they initially tried him in center field, and then he moved to right, and he became a Gold Glove caliber right fielder just because I think the corners serve him well. I think Jazz would be fine in a corner, but you know, what do I know? I don't see him playing shortstop. I don't think he can just, you know, maintain all that range over that position. I just think he's better either at second base or he's playing, you know, right or left field. I don't really think there's an in-between.
So why not then put Dane Myers at center field and then put Jazz at one of the corners? I mean,
I mean, theoretically,
There
you
you go.
could
We
do
figured
that,
it
but
out.
then you kind of have the Avi Garcia of all of it, that where he's
Oh
still
gosh.
here through the rest of this year, and he's under contract next year. Though next year it's easier to kind of sever ties. And the problem is, for an organization that doesn't spend a lot of money, if they're going to keep a guy, interesting guy to keep, they, particularly if you're paying him $13 million a year on an average annual basis, you're going to keep that guy, unfortunately. And that's kind of maybe, I think, a ripple in all of this that has clouded the way they could kind of maybe position their defense. And maybe one reason in absence of him why their defense is graded out so poorly is because you're playing a lot of guys, in my opinion. And again, it's all subjective in my opinion, but I just subscribe to the metrics, out of position. And I think that's why you're kind of finding yourself in these kind of theoretical conundrums of like, what do I do? Who's where? And it just always feels like nobody's playing where they really should be.
What's been bizarre is that ever since moving him to center, he's been exclusively in center these last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And that sort of defeats the purpose of having a guy that has the versatility to be both center field and middle infield. I was surprised.
Yeah.
I guess maybe last year I could understand it. They wanted him to get as many reps as possible at this new position, that they were all right with it. But there were even times late last year when it was clear they just did not have a shortstop and the team was competing and trying to win games, that it would always be Joey Wendell or Garrett Hampson or John Birdie. And it had to be, and he wasn't even a consideration there. There's a lot of value to having a guy that could switch between several up the middle positions, even if he's not great at them, for him to be able to move to cater to what the team needs most. Where if Dane Myers is on a really great hot streak, and even if he's not an everyday center fielder, there might be days where you want him in the lineup, and to just create the possibility where there's that extra outfield playing time and Jazz slides into the infield on certain days in order to make that make sense. I think if they are going to hold on to him beyond this deadline, potentially into next year, then that is something I'd love to see. I mean, that is what makes that is an additional element where he can add value that he's not really been allowed to add value to this point, where they have just cut out the infield part of the equation. And to me,
I think the first game of this series and then the rest will illuminate one thing that may kind of be like rubbing salt in a wound for the Marlins. You have the fact that Zach Gallen, a pitcher who was great while he was with you, will be pitching that first game of that series. And then you have the guy that the Marlins were long rumored to have been in conversations to trade for, I believe, at one point a couple off seasons ago, who, in my opinion, is the better Jazz Chisholm, and that's Ketel Marte, who was riding this like insanely weird kind of get one hit to extend your hitting streak, hot streak right now. Playing second base, another guy who moonlit in the outfield at times before settling at second base, where metrics like him better. And, that's just going to kind of suck to see, because in my opinion, I feel like all of us here could probably attest to the notion that Jazz Chisholm probably hasn't hit his full ceiling, because there's still things that we see that he can refine in his game and know he is capable of because of his athleticism, or at least we assess them to be as such. I mean, like, maybe watching a guy like Ketel Marte will just make a lot of people kind of envious of, who their franchise cornerstone is, at least from a position player standpoint.
I love this theory from Devin that they don't use him at shortstop because you want to continue to allow other teams to dream that he can play shortstop, and you don't want him to potentially go there and struggle and remove that from the equation. But maybe still give teams the fantasy that if they acquire him, that he could play those different spots. And I think, just to agree with what Lewis touched on before, with his arm, I'd say his arm strength has actually impressed me more so than not in the outfield. It's just the accuracy has been, especially this year, the accuracy of his throws have been really rough. He just doesn't really give himself a chance to get guys out trying to get that extra base, just because of how inconsistent he is with where exactly those throws are going. So that's something that has jumped out to me for sure. The other trade that I think we should touch on one more time here, even though it has already been covered extensively, Luis Arraez continues to. It is getting insane what he's doing with the Padres right now. This afternoon, his 8 consecutive multi-hit games. He went 4 for 5 today. He is hitting, as a Padre, well over 400 since he went over there. In fact, to be exact, he's hitting 419 in his first 17 games as a Padre. For a guy that got off to a slow start of the season, all of a sudden, he's now second in the batting title race, too, behind only Ohtani, who, although he's capable of all things, Ohtani, I would trust Arise to probably catch up to him relatively soon just because of the type of hitter that he is. So this to me was something that got me very confused, and why I disagreed with the timing of the deal is because it felt like the Marlins were selling low on him after getting off to that, by his standards, a relatively slow start. And it just makes me wonder, maybe I am overreacting, but 3 weeks later, Kevin, if the same trade happens now with his numbers all of a sudden looking a lot closer to what they did last year, and with especially with the Padres, all of a sudden Xander Bogaerts going down with an injury, all of a sudden it creates a lot more urgency for them to make a change. I feel like it's not crazy to say that if the Marlins waited a few more weeks and made the same trade under these circumstances, that they might actually get more in return, and that they really did. Just those few weeks moving as early as they did may have hurt exactly what they got back from the Padres in the deal.
Yeah, I don't, not even more, just more quality prospects. Someone who's actually maybe in their top 5 prospects. Maybe you don't have to give up maybe you don't have to pay off the entirety of Luis Arias's contract this season, something along those lines, because what he is doing, man, is nothing short of impressive. It's Luis Arias is one hell of a player, and he's in a great situation in San Diego where he's not playing on the field every day. I believe he's DHing a decent amount as well. So, and he's not playing a lot of second base either. I know they've played him at first base as well. So it's really been a mixed bag defensively. So it's, yeah, I mean, you look at it now, and there's the one thing that we know is that this organization at times just doesn't have the best timing with things. And it's really starting to bite them back that you could have had this type of production from Luis Arias for just 3 more weeks. Maybe you would have had a couple more wins off of it too. And then you trade him. Especially with the Bogaerts injury, I mean, it allows Arias to play a lot more second base if he really wanted to, because I would assume, well, no, because Hassan Kim's playing short for them still. Yeah, Bogaerts was second. So, yeah, no, definitely would have been an interesting situation there in San Diego. You would have had to give up a lot more than what they did. But, at least right now, the package is not turning out the greatest. You have Dylan Head right now just landed again on the, I believe, 7-day IL with an abductor strain. And once again, he got off to a really nice start in his Jupiter debut and played a couple more games. So, yeah, and then you have Nathan Mortarella and Marcy. They're looking all right in Pensacola. One of them probably bound to go to AAA soon. And Wusago has been, I don't even know. I haven't followed up with him and his production at AAA Jacksonville, to be honest with you. But I know he's pitched in about five or six games already with them. But obviously what Luis Arias is doing is just absolutely, no offense, not to say it, but shitting all over what this current.
It's disheartening.
Yeah.
It's disheartening. What does it say? What does it say, or what does it communicate to the other front offices about the way that the Miami Marlins front office views their players? It blows my mind. I saw that. I think you guys had posted on Twitter, like giving a grade for the trade. I don't know if it was on Twitter or the website, and I think it was like a C+ or something like that. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it's just terrible. It's terrible. Terrible. It's a shame.
I think that was Alex Carver's grade, and he was a little higher on the trade than even I was, but he was honest. Where, like, we were actually talking about before the stream that it's running low on really desirable trade assets that are on this group. You need to actually need to hit a home run.
Yeah.
And with this one, this just seems reminiscent of like some of the trades they made 6 years ago that didn't look great in the moment. And maybe somebody surprises us. Maybe there is somebody that they reach a potential they didn't think they had. Like I think of the Marcelo Zuna trade that brought in Zach Gallen of all people, and how he was really an afterthought in that trade package. And then all of a sudden he goes on and becomes just a way more dominant version, and it blows past the ceiling that people thought he had. People get this stuff wrong, and like, these prospects can surprise you with the improvement that they make. And so that's going to be just this really big test of this new player development setup that they had. The reason why they're back in this situation is because when they brought back in prospects, just so few of them actually got better during their years in the minor league system, especially on the hitting side. In fact, a lot of the promising hitters that they brought in would completely stall out. And if they even made the big leagues, just didn't have any success up there. That's what the Marlins think they can do differently now under a different front office that has set up different infrastructure, giving these guys more resources to learn and to train while they're in the minors. But yeah, it's going to take a while to really see that come to fruition. Meanwhile, the Padres, we'll see if it pays off for them. It's pretty critical for them to make the postseason, I would think, this year in order for them to feel good about the deal. As of right now, they're floating right around 500. So I think it's premature for them to be really happy about it at this point. Though still some time for that to play out. But I guess happy for Arise that he's in this situation where he's
why do you guys think that the trade happened as early as it did?
Frugality on the ownership's part. I mean, he was approached in the offseason was asked whether or not he would sign a long-term deal with the team, and noted he was open to it. And there was talk that he hadn't even been approached by the team about that. And I don't know if anything had maybe happened in the month following that. I believe this came out sometime in November, if I'm not mistaken. And, we're now, like 6 months on, and there have been no leakings as to maybe if the Marlins came to Arise and asked, do you want to be here long term? And from everything that we'd seen, it sounded like he enjoyed his time here. Like, we'd see his kids in the clubhouse. His family was always there. Like he was good with the media. He was good with the clubhouse attendance. He just made it. I mean, maybe that's just a reflection on his personality and who he is as a person and his character. But it sounded like, from at least what we saw and the way he played last year and before he got traded, that he wanted to stay here. And I just think it's something that the Marlins fumbled at the 1 yard line, when really they could have done this if they wanted to. And given that his skill set is so singular and his one tool is singular, and that he doesn't really do all that much else, he probably wouldn't have been that expensive anyway to lock up on a long-term deal. So I don't really understand why, and they just came to the realization, we're not going to encourage keeping him here long term. We may as well try to get something for him while his value's high. And again, a lot of us said, and probably still agree with the fact, that they probably didn't trade him when his value was at its peak. If they wanted to trade him and they weren't going to extend him, trade him at the winter meetings. Like, do that. It may have been a surprise, but at least, there would have been something that would have come out that would have suggested, okay, he didn't want to stay long term, or we just weren't willing to do that. And then you trade him when his value is higher and you have more time with him. But, I put nothing past this organization at this point to, kind of just fumble where they see fit to do so. So,
what I would just clarify, what was confusing is that they chose the exact moment where they just didn't have any leverage whatsoever. Like, if you have it during the winter meetings where every team is open-minded to making improvements, especially for a guy that could play a couple different positions and who has those full years of control ahead of him, like, that would have been any trade of Arise would have been very unpopular. But that is one where I think they would have had an opportunity to get more in return because of having more bidders involved. I feel like they could have waited deeper into this season and allowed him to get back on track after a relatively slow start. As I really think that just a matter of weeks would have made some sort of a difference for teams to be reassured that, wow, this guy, even though he has a limited skill set, that skill he has is really special and pretty valuable to what teams are trying to build. They could have had multiple teams involved, but the timing that they chose in early May, most teams are just not comfortable making a big splash at that time of year. They chose a time where teams are still assessing what they have and what they need. You can't get any sort of bidding war involved. They chose the exact moment where his average had dipped below 300. Not that that's all that important. I'd just say as like that, there may have been some doubts both offensively and defensively as well. His defense to start this year was really bad, and I think that could have hurt their leverage as well. That for whatever reason he was even less effective with the glove the first month of the year than he had been for most of his career. So that is something that also can drag down your value as well. It just feels like they chose the worst possible moments where they were the ones that were in a vulnerable position at that stage instead of waiting for something to swing in their favor, whether it was an injury like Xander Bogaerts that would have created more urgency for the Padres, or whether it was just waiting a little bit longer for other teams to have their own obvious needs. I feel like the timing will always perplex me, and Peter Bendix's explanations for that will never really.
Well, speaking of Bendix, I thought it was interesting when he was just like, "Oh, we talked to everybody," and then sure enough, I think it was like the next day, the GM of was it the Diamondbacks? That was like, "No, I didn't even know he was on the block." And so
Yeah, that was
I thought that was interesting.
That was Torey Lovella who said that. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing I'll add on to this, we've covered this for about like 2 or 3 days. That when the trade happened was kind of felt like it was all brewing up to happen at one point. You see him going to arbitration with his team. He loses his arbitration case where he has to sit down and hear from other people why you suck and why you should not be getting the money you deserve. And that's when you have to sit through that and lose your case. It definitely is a confidence hit. And obviously, I don't think that's going to hurt him too much because he probably wins his case next year if he wins another batting title. So, yeah.
As we welcome Isaac onto our show, 52 minutes in. Better late than never, I suppose.
53 minutes in. And not only can he win, will he probably win the batting title? It'll be 3 different teams, I think, that he will have won the batting title for. And obviously, that would be the first time in Major League history. So that's pretty cool.
Connect your mic while you're at it, by the way.
Oh, no, it's here.
No.
No, Chipotle was very delicious today. Thank you, Sean.
We're going to hop in now a little bit more on the D-backs themselves. Obviously, too early to look at the lineups for the series opener. That is still about 23 hours away. But this will at least give us a snapshot of all the position players that are active on these teams entering the series right here. Both sides. With the Diamondbacks, I am particularly irked by the fact that Corbin Carroll, who was one of the breakout stars in baseball last year, has gone off to such a slow start for them. So he continues to play every single day, but there's a lot more blue in Corbin Carroll's lines across the board than there was at this time a year ago. Like the D-backs, just for people that aren't aware, they themselves are off to somewhat of a disappointing start, although they have been better lately to get now up to 24 and 26, close to 500. But this is the team that went to the World Series last year, that spent a little money in the offseason, especially on starting pitching, that they thought would give them an even better chance of getting into October again and potentially make some sort of challenge to the Dodgers in the NL West. And instead, they're a team that they're still in the mix, obviously, but one that I think all things considered are a little bit below where a lot of people would have projected them entering the year right here.
Sure. Yeah, and for most of the season too, they didn't have what's his name, Jordan Montgomery, who they signed in the offseason or close to the season beginning. So that definitely hurt them a lot, not having another pitcher in that rotation. Yeah, and you kind of said it. Corbin Carroll's been struggling. You look at the bottom there, Jake McCarthy a little bit too, Kevin Newman, Eugenio Suarez, who was one of their big offseason acquisitions too. I mean, but props, they went out there, they made a big move. I guess Jock Peterson, who has been amazing for them. He has a 173 WRC plus. So definitely been an interesting team that I think is underperforming, but they should get it going soon. They really heated up towards the end of the season.
Isaac, now that you're joining us, is there anybody in particular on the D-backs that you find to be intriguing from one way or another?
Yeah,
they've had so far.
Yeah, I heard Lewis, talking about him earlier. Just Ketel Marte is just such an MVP candidate guy. Like, I know he had a little bit of a down stretch. I forget if it was last year or year before, but
he's just such a special player. He can play all over the place, and he has just been so good this season. Is his hit streak still active? I believe.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tag him now. I want to give him a moniker. I think he's the National League's answer to Jose Ramirez. And
Right. Yeah.
I think that's who
Switch
he
hitter, multiple positions.
low league average strikeout rate, good
Yeah.
defender. I think he does.
And he
just
walks
better.
too. He walks like
And
okay.
he steals bases. Like he's very well rounded as a player.
Yeah, he's awesome. He is someone obviously, like Kevin said, Jock Peterson's gone off to a really nice start for them, and he just seems like someone that's always just going to crush right-handed pitching. So, luckily, Miami does. I think they have it's Braxton and Trevor and Sixto.
Braxton, Sixto,
And Weathers. So,
If you want a storyline to watch early, Braxton Garrett unleashed the new cutter that he kind of came up with last year. If you guys remember his first start post that Braves blow up, where I think he gave up something like, was it 11 or 14 runs in that blowout against them last May? He deployed the cutter in his next outing against the Diamondbacks, and it wasn't a great outing. I think he gave up like 3 runs in 5+ innings, but that quickly became a pitch that turned the trajectory of his season around. So maybe we'll see how he uses that. Just don't leave one in the middle of the zone to Jock Peterson, because he is mashing all season. Diamondbacks have done pretty well early, though they haven't. Their win-loss record doesn't reflect it. The production they've gotten out of Randall Grichuk and Peterson, and then the continued production of both Marte and Christian Walker, who is also a Gold Glove caliber first baseman over there in Arizona. It leads me to believe that they'll be around come September. I think that their best baseball has yet to be played, and but be interested to see how Brax deploys his pitch mix tomorrow, given he kind of unveiled that cut fastball against them last year and then went on to have some good success with it.
And I will be interested in how Sixto does in his outing, especially at the very beginning of his outing. For people that have not been following this closely, he has some of the worst first inning performance of any starting pitcher in the league so far this season, allowing on average like 2 earned runs every first inning this entire season, including in his last outing. What he led 4 in the very first.
Yep.
He has minimum 5 starts. His 1980 ERA is the worst among all pitchers in baseball. And so it's, as you said, it's bad. I think, if it's another bad outing, it's, who knows what he even does next at the big league level.
Right. And I want to clarify that he's he's been the Marlins are listing him as their starter. I think in his initial post-game interview, Skip kind of left. He was wondering out loud, what are we going to do with this guy? What is the next step? Should we try an opener? Should we just do something different about his routine? At the very least, they seem that they're not seriously considering that opener route, that by listing Sixto as a starter, they intend to have him pitch in the first inning. I think we're getting pretty close to a point where if things do not turn around, that they could be reaching the end of the line with him as a starter on their team, as thin as the other alternatives are. If he's not going to go deep into games and he's not going to be effective early on, then I just don't know what it is that the team is doing at this point. So it is, there's a lot of pressure on him. If he really values being a starter, and I think he does, then he'll have to make that adjustment.
And that's what I was going to bring up too, because there's that possibility where you go with the opener. I mean, there's guys who could do it. Puck was starting games not too long ago. You let him go an inning or two, and then you go at Sixto. Obviously, there's guys who you could go to that are not Puck, but
Trevor can do it.
Yeah, Trevor, right? Once they finally realize he's not a starting pitcher, they could do that. But there's different ways you could go about this. But Sixto, man, I don't think he should be pitching, too much longer in these type of situations where you have him start games. I think he could be a decent reliever at most, but I mean, at least don't let him pitch in the first inning where, Skip said it. He put his team in a bad situation from the start. The Marlins did not win that game because Sixto was not good. He was really good after, but he wasn't good in that first inning. So Hohen's injured though, so you can't go with that.
Well, I bring this up just because Hoeing is on a rehab assignment right now, and he pitched. He just started it on Tuesday. He should be making another outing, I would guess, tomorrow. It doesn't seem that the plan is to stretch him out as a starter, but he is somebody that is fairly close to returning from the IL. And so there will have to be some sort of corresponding move on the pitching staff to bring Hoeing back. I would expect within the next week that he'll be back in the mix. So that is something to keep an eye on. We can now go into prediction time right here, about an hour into our program. Where's my cute little video to celebrate this occasion?
This is prediction time.
I don't want to like toot my own horn here, but I'm really good at this.
I've been really good at this recently in this past series. We hadn't shown the grades yet. Isaac and I, perfect picks for the Marlins versus Brewers series right here, having them take 2 out of 3 with Luzardo as the MVP. And this is how we do it every single series with our stream guests, our FOF staff, and our super subs making their predictions for how many games Marlins are going to win and who is the series MVP as determined by win probability added. We keep that stuff updated on the site. A big leaderboard that has 55 different entries. This is how they stack up so far this season. It's a 3-way tie for first place. Can't believe Nate isn't on here with us because Nate Karsmer has entered into a tie with Daniel Rodriguez and 10 of spades BK. That is Nicholas Milton, who's a recent stream guest of ours as well. So they're in a 3-way tie for first place. And you can see the rest of us right here and how everybody's tracking so far this season. It was very lucrative in the month of April to pick against the Marlins, but it has now become a more difficult process with the way that things have steadily changed course for them over the course of the season right here.
What's the prize for this again?
We are going to give the winner one of those teal throwback starter jackets.
Oh, so like the fantasy prize as well.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
No, I'll be getting 2 of them then.
So yeah, okay, Kevin.
Still a long season to go. We encourage people that if they aren't already playing along, become a super sub, fishonfirst.com/subscriptions. There's still time to catch up because this has been a relatively low scoring year so far. And so, yeah, we appreciate everybody that supports us over there. And this is just one way to show our appreciation to you right there. So I will get our music queued up without further ado. And I guess we'll start as we often do with, that's the wrong music right here. There we go. We'll start off with Kevin Barral for his Marlins D-backs series predictions.
I'm going to go with the Diamondbacks taking 2 out of 3 against the Marlins. Really did not get themselves in a good situation with Gallen, Montgomery, and Brendan Pfaadt. But I will go with Jock Peterson as my series MVP, OPSing over 1,000 against left-handed pitching. Gonna ride the hot hand. I think Mr. Peterson will have himself a nice series.
Let's go to Gabe right here. Tell us your predictions.
I'm going to go with the Diamondbacks winning 2. And my MVP will probably be Ketel Marte. Absolutely. I think he stays hot.
Speaking of staying hot, Isaac Azud coming off his perfect picks. Go ahead.
We're going to go with the Diamondbacks, unfortunately, taking 2 out of 3. I think the pitching will just be too much. And speaking of the pitching, Zach Gallen will be the MVP. The Marlins, in Gallen's 4 career starts against the Marlins, they have a 2.12 on base percentage, so sub-2 ERA against his former team. Zach Gallen, Diamondbacks win 2 out of 3.
Alex Krutchik, your predictions, sir.
You're muted.
I'm going to go Marlins 2 out of 3. And then my MVP is Brian Dela Cruz.
Okay, no.
Luis Adio Weiss, try to be concise, please. Your series predictions.
2 out of 3. Arizona will take 2 out of 3. MVP is going to be Marte, just because he's great.
And I will take us home with my predictions right here. I had the Diamondbacks winning 2 out of 3, stopping this runaway Marlins train in their tracks in Arizona. MVP going to Corbin Carroll. Please, for my own selfish reasons, I'd love him to turn around his individual performance. Really talented young hitter that I hope gets back on track. There we go. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. FOF Live, presented by Berger and Hicks. This series starting in about 25 and a half hours, late night with the Fish on both Friday and Saturday. on the West Coast at the start of this road trip, and we will have you covered as best as we can from afar. So hope everybody enjoys the series. We'll have another one of these shows, of course, heading into the next series. In between, we have State of the Fish on Sunday night on Twitter, so you can tune into that, call in with your stuff. We have coverage every single day, new on the site, fishonfirst.com, so you can find it all there. I've been Eli Sussman, along with Kevin and Isaac and Gabe and Lewis and Alex Krutchik, everybody who tuned in. Appreciate all the support, and we hope to talk to you again real soon. Go Fish.